Hi, folks. I am Dalton Mortimer of the Authenticator, and here we are at last. Yesterday, we went through Hollywood's best attempts of the year 2022, and today we uh, we do the other thing, the the thing that is necessitated by the existence of a best list. For if there is a high to be aspired to, there is a low to be avoided. And here we bloody are. Okay, first of all, first thing, I realized that I didn't, before we get into the business at hand, I realized that I didn't really address the chat much, um, yesterday when I streamed the best list, and that's because I'm doing my list for memory because the list is recorded on my phone, but StreamYard will throw an absolute hissy fit if I minimize the window while I'm on my phone. So I'm doing my list for memory, and so I kind of had to keep on a mental track of some sort. Otherwise I would lose my place, and we would have been reduced to a series of ums and ahs while I tried to remember what order shit came in. Also, yesterday contained plenty of rants, even being the best list, so you can imagine how much an authenticator who finds no value in the things he is told to evaluate is going to rant. So you have been warned both in the title and now here. There will be spoilers, there will be rants, and there will be no mercy from the likes of me. Anyway, so this time around, there's no equivalent to the honorable mentions, which I suppose would be the dishonorable mentions. Um, Mostly because I was trying to be as nice as I could, i.e., if a movie didn't deserve even tentatively to be here, I didn't want to put it here just for the sake of symmetry. Um, and there are even some on the lower ranks of my worst list that, like, I don't viscerally hate. We will get to the ones I viscerally hate. Don't you worry your sweet little heads about that. But there are some here that's like, yes, it's bad, therefore it deserves to be here, but I can kind of see it. Um, and to that end, number 10, Thor, Love and Thunder. Oh, how far the mighty have fallen. And I think I have figured out the differences between Thor, Thor 4 and Thor Ragnarok, which I still maintain is the best and only Thor to really understand the tone that Thor should be going for. The second verse, same as the first, if you watched the video yesterday, please sing along to the rant, is that while Ragnarok and many other movies in this same vein, like Guardians 1 and 2, or Suicide Squad 2, or Deadpool, or even the Shazam movies, um, while all of those movies were the very definition of sincere, i.e., they embraced what they were to the highest degree and they wanted to see how far they could push it. And they were self aware along the way, so they were sort of in on the joke rather than mocking the people who were in on the joke. Ragnarok is the exact bloody opposite, and that's where it goes wrong. It doesn't go wrong because it goes too far into comic bookiness. That's stupid. It goes wrong because unlike Guardians 1 and 2, the Ragnarok, Shazam, Deadpool 1 and 2, and various other movies in this genre, it is not being sincere and embracing what it is to its highest degree. It is being a dismissive, mocking bullshit. It seems like Taika Waititi had a self-hatred for comic book movies all along, and I don't want to judge him too harshly for that because, it is his mind. He can do with it what he likes. But, Taika, my dude, my brother in geekery, you shouldn't be expressing these anti-comic book movie views while you're being tasked with making a sequel to an incredibly successful and incredibly comic book movie. This is the wrong place and the wrong time and the wrong context to do these things. The other major problem of Ragnarok appears to be, and it's related to what I just said, um, Taika Waititi apparently fell victim to the same creative syndrome as George Lucas and Patty Jenkins before him, i.e., someone needed to exist for him to be a sounding board for, like he had in the first one, because in Ragnarok, while he was definitely behind the movie, he was not the main writer of the first movie, and therefore his off the wall, I'm going to do whatever random thing strikes me, I'm going to do whatever thing sticks, impulse was tempered by someone who did their best to translate that into some sort of how do we be as sincere and as meaningful about this as we can filter. And the same thing happened with George Lucas after Empire, and the same thing happened um, with Patty Jenkins in Wonder Woman 2. The creative, I'm going to do whatever random thing strikes me at the moment, people are worthwhile people, and they definitely deserve to be involved in the creative process. But even if there's someone who they're working with who agrees with them on stuff, they need to have someone to bounce these ideas off of so they can get past the, well, it was cool in the moment syndrome, because it being cool in the moment while you're in the process of making the movie is one thing, all of these aforementioned directors, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate into something that the audience is going to like to watch, especially not if you're in the process of mocking the genre that people came to consume. That, again, if you're going to be hating on comic book movies, please make a movie other than a comic book movie while you're doing it. Never mind. But these are the problems with Thor: Love and Thunder. Number one, while other over the top, cool ass, I'm going to embrace comic bookiness to its highest degree. Comic book movies, we're in on the joke and we're self aware about being in on the joke, and we're not in any way mocking. This one was mocking. And number two, this is why creative people need teams on occasion. And this is true even with people who don't necessarily try and ground each other. Like, the closest analogy I can make is Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon. Dan Harmon, as we know from his Everyone is a Nazi screed around the time that they were making season 3, and the eventual result of that, which was the fascist Morty episode, wherein he literally called everyone who doesn't like his creative decisions in the Rick and Morty fan base fascist. Um, he can go a little nuts when he's unfiltered. And as we've most recently discovered with Justin Roiland getting Weinstein, shall we say, um, apparently Justin Roiland also has his moments of uncouthness. But when they work together and they can kind of find a creative equilibrium, they can balance each other out and make something that's actually pretty awesome, which is most of Rick and Morty, except for certain parts of season 3. Again, cough, cough. Why would you call your own fan base fascist for not liking the creative direction of the show? Take the criticism, goddamn you, fascist Morty episode. In any case, I've gone on about this long enough, but yes, those are the two major problems with Thor: Love and Thunder that make them non-viable, or that make Love and Thunder. I forgot they were two separate things for a second. Um, that make Love and Thunder not viable, whereas Ragnarok was, and I still maintain this, the best and most accurate adaptation of a Thor movie that we've gotten so far. Not saying they can't do better. I'm just saying Ragnarok is the gold standard for now until something comes along to unseat it. The other problem is that I'm not. I'm sure I'm not alone in this. when I say that they should have done with Gore the God Butcher what they did with Thanos in Infinity War and actually make him the main character of the story and have the other characters interlock with and, oppose and essentially be there to um, springboard off of him. Especially if you're going this every character who's one of the heroes is comedic, whereas the villain is the only one playing it straight approach. That probably would have also benefited this movie more if Gore was allowed to be Gore a lot more because the concept of Gore as a character was cool and Christian Bale playing Gore was very cool. And B, Gore should have been the straight man to all of the otherwise zany weirdness, and also probably should have been the main character, a la Thanos in Infinity War. These are the things that led Love and Thunder to be here. And now on we move, because I've spent my allotted 3 or so minutes to Love and Thunder and then some probably. Anyway, number 9, Jurassic World Dominion. So I like everyone else, I assume, or at least everyone else who was capable of proposing a possibility of what the next one would be like at the end of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom was like, okay, I see what you're doing. The clone girl let all the dinosaurs out, and now we're basically going to get a Rise of the Planet of the Apes style thing where Jurassic World isn't just the name of the park, it's literally dinosaurs are going to slowly bring back the Jurassic period, and then humans are going to have to coexist with dinosaurs, a la, again, Planet of the Apes premise, or even to some degree, Zombieland premise, i.e., the world is changed by this one MacGuffin, and now we have to cope with the idea of, how do humans interact with a world that's being dominated solely by dinosaurs and so on. And when I heard the rumors that the original cast of Jurassic Park were coming back to deal with this, I thought, okay, so clearly Jurassic World is going to happen again. Think along the lines of Planet of the Apes or Zombieland, and then the original cast are going to be the most expert people in dealing with this, probably particularly Ian Malcolm, and then awesomeness will ensue. The problem with Jurassic World Dominion? None of that happens or is relevant in any way. Because even though they had a virtual conceptual, like, instant win button of doing the things I just mentioned, they decided to do none of these things. And instead, the fact that the dinosaurs are now out and in the world is basically all but window dressing. The fact that the main cast is back is basically a side adventure, and the main plot, such as it is in Jurassic World Dominion, has to do with climate change affecting cloning technology, and now we have giant quasi-prehistoric locusts that the main cast from the original Jurassic Park are now going to have to deal with. This is also going to become a running theme, but when the obvious correct answer is staring you in the face, and everyone in your audience who cares to know it knows it, doing the exact opposite or deliberately flouting the obvious correct answer, unless you have a very, very good idea of how to improve this concept, is always going to be doomed to failure. You had you had an A or A plus concept sitting there right in front of you, ready to go. The work was already done. All you had to do was take that concept and set it to screen. And we're dead. We're doomed. It failed. The entire process is boring. Like I said, the dinosaurs themselves are lampshaded in like the first few minutes of the movie, and then they only come back to essentially act as the human protecting counterweight to the giant locust thing. And I'm like, okay, Planet of the Apes already did this. once, correctly, and Zombieland already did this concept correctly, and Jurassic World has existed as a franchise for more than 20 years, so there's no possible way that no one figured out how to do this, especially with the title Jurassic World Dominion, i.e., a Jurassic World, which is both the name of the theme park and now a newly formed Jurassic version of the world, and Dominion, meaning that the dinosaurs would have dominion over the world because they're out of the cage now. Like, these things were very, very obvious and very, very straightforward and very, very hard to fuck up. And yet, it was fucked up. Even with the original cast, even with everything laid out before you by Matt Reeves, by the person who I can't remember who created Zombieland, by all of these previous versions of this premise with various other different MacGuffins. And you felt the need to untell the correct answer and tell a different answer entirely instead. Because let's turn Jurassic World into a movie about environmentalism and giant locusts, and let's make the main characters a complete side quest in their own movie, while making the main characters the clone who released the dinosaurs in the first place. All of that is just so, like, it's literally akin to the famous complaint everyone made about the Disney Star Wars movies of, like, you had the potential to do Han, Luke, and Leia together in one scene at least, and nowhere in the Disney trilogy did you get Han, Luke, and Leia together in the same movie or scene. It's that levels of, you had the correct answer right there in front of you, already raring to go, and you fucked it. That and even aside from all of that Jurassic World fanboyism that you might say is immaterial, the movie is dull, the movie is nonsensical, and did I mention the giant locusts come out of nowhere basically because of an environmentalist theme? Just why? Just why any of this whole rigmarole? Anyway, that is number 9, Jurassic World: Dominion there. Number 8, 3,000 Years of Longing. This is yet another case of, you had all the work done ahead of time, all you had to do was assemble tab A into slot B. How did you fuck this up? Because here's a movie which is a George Miller movie, George Miller of Mad Max Fury Road fame. That's point in its favor number 1 that couldn't possibly go wrong, that somehow manages to. It stars Idris Elba, again, point 2 of how could they possibly fuck this up. You have Idris Elba in a George Miller movie. And point 3, it's basically an adult version of Aladdin, where a woman whose actress I don't remember off the top of my head, but she is also good in almost everything she's in, falls in love with a genie played by Idris Elba, and there is some star-crossed lover type thing where she might be the reincarnation of his past lovers from several thousand years ago, i.e. the titled 3,000 Years of Longing. You would think this would be easy to do. George Miller, Idris Elba, playing a genie who falls in love with a woman who might be his reincarnated lover from 3,000 years ago, and yet we still find ourselves with history of violence syndrome, i.e., how in God's name do you fuck that up? But they do, because it's dull, it's boring, it's forgettable, and it does not at any point take advantage of its premise. This is exactly how they do what they do. It's dull, it's forgettable, it's annoying, and all I'm left with is the inexorable feeling of, again, quoting the line from History of Violence, how do you fuck that up? How do you fuck that up? But they do! They do! So, yeah, 3,000 Years of Longing, a movie that I was basically predetermined to like, is now number 8 on my It is now number 8 on my worst of the year list. Oh, again, how easy this premise should have been to exploit, and oh, how far the mighty have fallen with regards to George Miller, Idris Elba, and the concept of genie movies in general, apparently. Anyway, number 7, The Woman King. You remember the stuff I said yesterday about movies and art in general should exist for its own sake and should not be subject to utilitarianizing bullshit of like my themes and my socio-political context and my authorial intent and what I as the author want to say rather than what people actually want to see. Remember all that business? Well, apologies for getting distracted there. My brother had to bring something into my room. Anyway, you remember that whole like 20 minutes of the 45-minute video that I spent singing that particular tune yesterday? Well, the main problem with the Woman King is it literally only exists, apparently, to be an avatar of the current zeitgeist framework of a mixture of social justice in general, in the form of like BLM and that sort of the George Floyd zeitgeist, more or less, and also intersectional feminism. Because, for those that don't know, this is a movie about a tribe, or a rather a squadron of female warriors from a tribe called the Tahobi who fought the British Empire. And the problem being is the Tahomi, otherwise known as the modern day nation of Benin, were a group of Africans responsible for creating, profiting from, instigating, and perpetuating the slave trade, both in their own native Africa and um, by working with uh, the European colonizers. But because, also small print, in real life, the Tahomi were, or rather the squadron that the Woman King is featuring, the Tahomi Amazon warriors, quote unquote, um, regularly engaged in torture, regularly engaged in enslavement, regularly engaged in castration. Basically, pick a humanitarian failing you can expect from slavers or from primitive African tribes, and this particular segment of the Tahomi did those things. They also failed miserably when they fought the British in real life, um, because it was inevitable that they would kind of fail. And in theory, this is a premise for a movie that could have actually worked. Like play, and I'm going to explain my version of how this could have worked. Namely, if you, for example, frame it as a tragedy, frame it as basically a version of Macbeth where where Macbeth is not a character, and we follow the slow drifting into madness of a Lady Macbeth who has gone mad with absolute power, and then is predestined to fail because of her own both sadism and hubris. Like that would have been a entirely worthwhile story to tell if you wanted to tell the story of the Tahomi Amazon warriors and how they were the bad guys all along, but they didn't realize it, and they slowly drifted further and further into madness, and then eventually their madness drove them to maniacal ambition, and they fought a hopeless battle. There was no chance of them winning, and it was essentially preordained that they would fail, but we still feel bad for them because we watched their slow descent into madness. That would have been a worthwhile version of this premise. But instead, what we get is, hey guys, Wakanda, Wakanda as a premise did really, really well over in the Marvel movies. So why don't we modify actual history through the lenses of BLM, the George Floyd syndrome, and intersectional feminism to paint these people who were torturous, sadistic slavers as the good guys. And even though they got butchered and failed miserably in real life, let's have them win because it'll be an inspirational story. Derp. Because Africans never sold their own people into slavery, don't you know? Yeah. Um. Well, okay. So the movie does vaguely address that um the Tahomey were slavers, or the modern day people of Benin were slavers, but they sort of do this thing where like the main characters are all like the outliers in their culture, and they're like, well, we feel really bad about this, or we feel like we're circumstantially justified because we kind of have to because otherwise colonialism. Yeah, no, that's not the route you go. You go like the doomed doomed to their own failure, doomed to their own madness, tragic villain route. That, like, again, the aforementioned. Do Macbeth, but if Lady Macbeth was the main character and then went mad with her own power. Given that Lady Macbeth was also kind of the main villain in Macbeth to begin with, because she was constantly instigating Macbeth to do shit he didn't want to do. Like that sort of take on this, where we feel bad as the tragic villain slowly spirals into, further and further depths of badness, and then eventually, through their own maniacal ambition, is marched to their own preordained, hilariously over the top failure. Like that would have been a good premise for a movie. But instead, we get the army of Tahomey Amazons were perfect soldiers, just like the Dormelage from Black Panther, and they didn't do anything wrong. And if their culture around them ever did anything wrong, it was either circumstantially justified because colonialism, or they felt really bad about it and wanted to stop it, but they didn't feel like they had enough power because women's oppression slash mud, pre-industrial patriarchy. Derp. Yeah, I don't care how much skill you put into this premise. There are some things that were just doomed to fail. And again, it's not the let's make a movie about the Tahomey Amazons part that's doomed to fail. It's the let's make a movie about what we would prefer the Tahomey Amazons to have been through the lens of the BLM, post George Floyd, and intersectional feminism. So yeah, Woman King. I don't care how many artsy fartsy frills you put on it. It's bad. It's ideological gobbledygook. It's literal propaganda. And with any luck, this kind of social justice propaganda will be regarded with exactly the same amount of contempt as your average Pure Flix movie is currently regarded for being soulless, one-dimensional Christian propaganda. In my ideal future, both of these moralizing cunts will be and I realized I just swore um, in a swear word that Anglin doesn't like. But it slipped out, and I won't do it again. So hopefully he will overlook it, especially because he also regularly breaks his own rules. Anyway, but in my ideal future, both of these moralizing twits will be regarded with exactly the same amount of contempt. But until then, we still get another 10 years or so of social justice propaganda pieces like The Woman King. Thus, we, yeah, we will have to deal with those just like we had to deal with the occasional Christian propaganda piece back in the day. Oh well. Eventually, hopefully, both of them will be considered irrelevant, but, until then, the social justice zeitgeist is the dominant one. And I really hope that traditionalism doesn't make a comeback, but who knows? We might have to go through this again in another 20 years just with pure flicks instead of social justice. Who knows? Anyway, next movie, I believe we're on number 6. This movie is Avatar: The Way of Water. And I have a lot to say here. But I guess I should address the things that people are inevitably going to end up screaming in the comments. but it's so pretty, but it's so visually stunning, but it's such a technological tour de force. To which my response is, really? Yeah, it's a technological marvel, but that technology isn't being used to do anything interesting. I liken I guess the entire Avatar franchise now to an artist who is given a blank canvas and decides to draw a photorealistic bowl of fruit to like the highest degree of resolution a artist can. On some kind of paper that might be a worthwhile endeavor, but Dolly over there is doing the thing with the melting clock, and Lord only knows what kind of eldritch, you know, what kind of Christian mythology informed eldritch abomination William Blake is drawing over there somewhere. Like that's my main problem with Avatar. You can have the highest technology out there, but if you don't actually use it for anything engaging, interesting, or compelling, I'm not going to clap just because you made the most photorealistic bowl of fruit ever possible. And here's the other thing. Photorealism does really, really shoot James Cameron in the foot. It does. It's horrifyingly dull because James, I know you're impressed by how photorealistic you can make shit, but stylization is a good thing. And especially when you can literally make a world from scratch, when you have the aforementioned blank canvas and enough paints and technical skill to make anything you can imagine on that canvas. When you choose to make a photorealistic bowl of fruit or the equivalent of it instead of anything engaging. Again, Dolly's over there making the melting clocks. William Blake is doing whatever crazy shit William Blake is doing, and you're over there making a photorealistic bowl of fruit. I can't help but tell you that no matter what your technical skill is, you're misusing your resources here because there are many more creative uses of this technology that could be used. Also, speaking of a movie dominated entirely by authorial intent and themes, those things that I spent 20 minutes yesterday bitching about and basically holding in absolute contempt. James, the kind of moralistic environmentalist messaging you're doing with this franchise thus far was old when Captain Planet did it before I was even freaking born, or at least can even remember watching. Because I remember watching Captain Planet, but when I was watching it, it was reruns. I'm pretty sure that Captain Planet came out before 1995, which was the year I was freaking born. And the noble savage shit you're doing with the Na'vi was old when Pocahontas did it, and your version doesn't even contain songs as awesome as Mine, Mine, Mine or Savages. So, like, you're already frankly, you were already out of date in 2009 when you did this. And it's 2020 freaking 2 and 2023 as I'm sitting here ranting about it as the movie is still in the goddamn theater. And unlike Top Gun Maverick, which is a movie that recaptures the spirit of like 80s stroke 90s action movies and how awesome they were and how kind of gung ho, kind of action movie fuck yeah they were. Avatar, on the other hand, gives me the distinct impression that James Cameron channels the 80s and 90s, not because he wants to recapture what made the 80s and 90s interesting, compelling, or awesome, but because he genuinely doesn't understand that the the cinematic landscape has evolved at all in between the 80s and 90s action movies that he's famous for creating and now. And also, it must be said, and I'm gonna say it, that you guys remember how back when Twilight was a thing, one of the many complaints about Twilight was that Bella Swan was an absolute blank slate character for all of the middle-aged wine moms or suburban moms and all of the hormonally driven teenage girls to kind of project themselves onto, and that's why she didn't have a personality. Well, unfortunately for you, James, Jake Sully is the male equivalent of Bella Swan. I'm not saying they're the same character, because what you expect from a female protagonist in a supernatural romance is different from what you expect from a male character in a movie that is very much stuck in the worst parts of the 80s action movie formula, which is why Jake Sully and Bella Swan are different characters, but they are exactly the same when it comes to being a utter lack of personality and basically being the default. I am generic action movie male protagonist number 14752. And his family aren't helping, James. That they're not helping, because in order for me to care about the world I'm in, you have to give me concepts worth latching onto, which we previously established. Avatar is basically the cinematic equivalent of a photorealistic bowl of fruit painted on a blank canvas. And no matter how beautiful that photorealistic bowl of fruit is, there are people doing more interesting things with that blank canvas, James. And or when it comes to the story elements, you have to give me characters worth caring about before I would just choose to care about them by default. And yeah, no. Also, the plot contrivances in Avatar: The Way of Water make no sense. Um, like the fact that Korich is back in an Avatar body of his own, which, by the way, shouldn't he hate? Shouldn't he have contempt for the notion of existing in an Avatar body? Because he was very like genocidally opposed to the Na'vi in the previous movie. So shouldn't he have woken up in an Avatar body, seen the video about his past self cloning himself into an Avatar body, and then like immediately killed himself so that he didn't have to deal with the stink of being a Na'vi? Like that would have been a character consistent thing for to happen, and it doesn't happen. He's like, well, at the very least, I can use this body to destroy my enemies, Gur. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't like that only vaguely jives with the characterization you had previously. So bollocks to that whole line of thinking there. Also, despite the massive hay that was made about unobtainium in the previous movie, um, it apparently is utterly irrelevant now, because we can harvest the like uh neurological chemicals of alien super intelligent whales, and it gives humans immortality, or rather, at the very least, prevents aging. Which, not for nothing, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to make this point, but guys, you can make clone bodies, and you possess the technology to make a perfect replica of someone's like brain scan in said clone bodies. Even excluding the it's more expensive to create a Navi body thing. Like you could just make regular human bodies, download your consciousness into them, and then like this whole we need this whale juice to make ourselves immortal thing is kind of all but meaningless. Like if you possess the potential to not only create blank clone bodies, but also to literally download everything personality wise or life experience wise about you into them, you've already hacked immortality. It's already done. The foundational premise of this movie requires that this technology already exists in another form that is much less costly than fly halfway across the universe, fight a alien race that we previously lost to, and murder whales that are sacred to said culture. Like this seems like immortality with infinite numbers of extra steps you don't need when you have the technology to clone self, download memories into clone self, continue existence. Never mind. Um, but yeah, Way of Water is is shit, and and the Avatar franchise only has value, in my opinion, as a literal visual effects demo. And even then, when I see the Avatar movies, all I can think is this is a semi-interesting visual effects demo. I can't wait for someone who has actual creativity to use this for something more interesting. Yeah, so yes, James, by all means, go ahead and make 5 of these. And while you're at it, make 3 at least of the Alita Battle Angel movies, because not for nothing, but Alita Battle Angel also pushes the boundaries of what's visually possible with movies, and is actually a series that I would actually like to see continue. Like, I wish James Cameron would put half the effort he puts into pretending that Avatar is the biggest thing ever into giving me more Alita Battle Angel movies. Like, I like Titanic better than I like Avatar. I like Alita Battle Angel more than I like Avatar. Can we get more of those instead of more of Avatar? Because I just don't like, you're not using this technology for anything interesting in the Avatar franchise. You're using it for plenty interesting things in the Alita Battle Angel franchise, and it's actually ahead of its time because it's actually creating good adaptations of anime in the West, which is something we desperately need. We don't need more environmentalist moralism, because environmentalist moralism from the 90s basically turned into modern day social justice moralism. And if you don't believe me, ask your average climate change protester what they think of intersectional feminism, or ask your average intersectional feminist what they think of climate change. They are entirely consistent with one another. Even Pixar couldn't tell a good and interesting environmentalism story. The only thing that made Wall-E interesting was they only spent half of it on the annoying moralistic environmentalist Screed, and they spent the other half on a much more interesting romance between two robots in a dystopian future. That was much better. Anyway, so even Pixar can't do moralistic environmentalism better than Captain Planet. James, just lay off already. Anyway, so we're on number 5. Yeah, this is where we get into the things that actually make me annoyed. Like, the first 3 movies on my worst list, they were bad and they deserve to be on the list, but I could at least see why someone would get some value from them. Um, but like number 6 onwards is where I can't see anyone getting any value from any of this, and I kind of resent the fact that these movies exist, period. And my number 5 is Pauly Shore's Pinocchio, because that is a thing that exists. You know, when there are direct to video movies or independent ripoff movies like The Asylum, you usually can at least see where some kind of effort or some kind of self-aware humor was put in, where you kind of go, yeah, okay, that was okay, Asylum. And then every so often with The Asylum, you'll get movies that are so out there and gonzo that you're like, you know what, yeah, fine. Like when they did the Grim Avengers and had the various characters be from fairy tales. That was cool. Or Sharknado, that sort of thing. Those are cool. Pauly Shore's Pinocchio looks like something you would get in a bad Nintendo 64 game. Like, the graphic quality we're talking about here isn't even up to the standards of the average PlayStation 1 game. We're talking like Superman the video game, the famously bad fly through the rings Superman the video game levels of graphics here. And Pauly Shore is playing Pinocchio. Like, that's like doing an adaptation of Rumpelstiltskin, where Rumpelstiltskin is played by Tommy Wiseau, and the princess is played by the woman who previously played Jessie Spano on Saved by the Bell and ended her career with freaking Showgirls. That's the level of why does this exist that we are currently on with Pauly Shore's Pinocchio. Also, I find it disturbing that it's been 20 years or so since I've seen Pauly Shore in a thing. His voice has not changed. He still sounds like a college kid who is still partially going through puberty, and his voice still needs to continue dropping. We're still there. The man needs to, like, I don't support people taking drugs, But when your voice is similar to Pauly Shore's and you're well into your like 40s and you still sound like a surfer bro slash slacker college kid, take some testosterone, if for no other reason than so other people won't have to listen to your voice anymore being like that. Like that's the level we're at with Pauly Shore's Pinocchio. Like even the Robert Zemeckis live action remake of Pinocchio has more reason to exist, more craftsmanship put in it than Pauly Shore's Pinocchio. Thus, it gets to the number 5 spot. What could possibly be worse, you ask? And more importantly, how in the hell are there 4 movies worse than this that came out in the year 2022? Well, for number 4, I can't believe I'm doing this obligatory joke, but it's Morbin time. Yeah, my number 4 is Morbius. It's just bad. It's so bad. Uh, the the I'm sorry. Normally, like I say, I don't like to respond too much when I do these because I don't want to lose my place. But Ahsoka just asked, which I was referring to when I referred to the Robert Zemeckis one. The Robert Zemeckis one was the one for Disney. The Guillermo del Toro one was the one for Netflix, and the Pauly Shore one, which is the one that was my number 5, is the one that was direct to video. Because apparently everyone just decided, let's make our best attempt at doing Pinocchio, even if there's no reason for us to do so this year. Yeah, the one that stars Pauly Shore is the worst one. Robert Zemeckis' one just wound up kind of being average for me, and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio was number 2 on my best list yesterday. Pauly Shore's one is definitively the worst Pinocchio we got this year. Um, in in any case, back to Morbius. To start off with, and this is a slight sidebar, and I know I don't usually literally attack the premises of movies because I normally go with the be the best version of your premise you can be, and then so be it. But even excluding the fact that Morbius is literally like something you would have gotten in 2003 from the comic book genre before it was even a full-fledged genre. Like we're talking like Keanu Reeves Constantine or like Spawn without the writing but with the bad graphics levels awful here. Um it, even without all of the technical failures of Morbius the movie. I'm just gonna say it. I've always found Morbius to be a stupid character. And the reason requires me to explain, so I'm going to steal a line from Linkara and go, time for backstory. See, in the 40s through the early 60s, there was this thing called the Comics Code Authority. And one of the aspects of the Comics Code Authority was you couldn't portray directly supernatural things in superhero comics. And so to get around this stipulation, Marvel created what I refer to as a science pyre, i.e., a vampire in all but name who was created through some kind of mutagenic science experiment rather than uh, anything resembling supernatural things that you would normally expect vampires to be related to. And if they had left Morbius in that era where we can't use the supernatural, so let's create a science pyre, he wouldn't piss me off. But the thing is, shortly after the creation of Morbius, the Comics Code Authority was basically all but lifted, and Marvel did introduce proper supernatural vampires, usually relating somehow to the Darkhold, because the Darkhold is, of course, the source of all dark magic within the context of the Marvel Universe. So here you have Tomb of Dracula, here you have in Contu the Living Mummy, here you have Werewolf by Night. All of these supernatural characters, all of whom are tied to the Darkhold in some way, including vampires. And then off in the corner here somewhere, you still have the stupidly created Science Pyre. Now, there is a way I think Morbius could work as a character. And then I swear to God, I will get back into explaining how the movie makes this even worse. If you wanted to do Morbius in a post Darkhold vampire Marvel universe, what you could do is have him have the Science Pyre backstory, and then have him go looking for a cure to his vampirism in the Darkhold, but have it transform him even further into a vampire, i.e., have him have the superhuman Science Pyre aspect on top of genuine for real supernatural vampirism, and have him basically be what amounts to a super vampire, i.e., he is to vampires what Captain America is to normal humans, or Spider-Man is to normal humans. That would be a smart idea. That would be a good way of using Morbius that wouldn't have him be this also ran from before we could use the supernatural because comics got authority from the 60s. Like, if you actually made use of his uniqueness as a science pyre to make him basically a superhuman version of a vampire who is even stronger than someone like Dracula because of the half scientific, half supernatural nature of his powers, that would be an interesting use of this character. But they never do that. They always just leave. There are all these actual vampires running around who are actually supernatural and actually connected to the Darkhold. And then there's also this guy who, for some reason, is randomly, technologically, or mutagenically turned into something resembling a vampire because reasons. Anyway, that's me attacking kind of the even premise of Morbius. And then, once again, we have to bring in the fact that it's like a movie from the era of comic book movies before comic book movies were allowed to be comic book movies. Like, Venom was also kind of an unnecessary throwback to, like, 2005 levels of comic book movie, more so than I would have liked. But it at least focused on the parts of the sort of pre-comic book movie genre era of comic book movies where they were bad, they were unlike their source material, they weren't as fun or engaging or as enjoyable as their source material, but they at least were trying something, and they at least were kind of their own thing, so you could kind of enjoy them in a so bad it's good way. Think like X-Men Origins Wolverine, or X-Men 3, or um or Bully Maguire as he's called with regards to Spider-Man 3. That level of, well, you're nothing like I want you to be, and you're nothing like actually addressing the source material you're working with, but you're doing something that's kind of engaging. That was what Venom was. And then Morbius reminds you of everything that has improved about the comic book genre in the last 20 years, cinematically speaking. But it exists in 2022. Because that's something we still need every great now and again. We need something that completely misunderstands, misrepresents, and doesn't care to accurately represent its source material, and doesn't understand why people are mad that it's not addressing the source material. To be fair, though, there are two somewhat redeeming qualities to Morbius. Everything else is terrible. The visual effects are terrible, the storytelling's terrible, the representation of the characters is terrible, the world building is terrible. Everything else is terrible. Everything. To a man, everything else is terrible. Like, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is better than Morbius. Spawn is better than Morbius. Even, like, Batman and Robin, and yes, I realize how much I committed heresy just now, is better than Morbius. But there are two somewhat redeeming qualities of Morbius. Number one, Jared Leto's actually giving a somewhat decent performance here. Like, this is what I would have preferred from his Joker. Like, that casting him as Morbius, apart from all of his stupid "I'm an edgy boy, look at me being so method" behind the scenes shit, which still happened in Morbius, just like it did in Suicide Squad. Um, Even aside from all that, he's actually delivering a somewhat decent performance here. Also, Matt Smith is here, and he is having a blast playing the villain, almost to the point where I wish the roles were reversed, and Jared Leto was playing the villain, and Matt Smith was playing Morbius. I think that would have also improved the movie considerably. Um, but aside from those two things, Morbius plays like a movie from like 1999, trying to not be a comic book movie while still adapting comic book source material in the same way as many of those movies did at the time. Before we realized, hey, we can actually adapt comic book movies and they can be worthwhile in their own right. Who knew? Um, and honestly, if it had come out then, if it had come out in like between like 1999 and 2005, I could see it being something we have nostalgia over in the same way we kind of have similar nostalgia over like X-Men 3 or so. But given that it came out in 2020 frickin' 2, why? Also, it does get somewhat points for just being an artifact of trolling because apparently studios have learned nothing about how to engage with the internet in between now and the Rick and Morty Szechuan sauce fiasco, to the point that 4chan was basically able to troll the studio into re-releasing Morbius a second time and almost got them to do it a third time just just by virtue of feigning potential fandom, which honestly I wish that same mentality would work with Black Adam because Black Adam deserved the kind of fan loyalty that the 4chaners were faking for Morbius. That in a sane world, that's what would have happened. The 4chaners would have used the effort they put into getting Sony to release Morbius a second time to rallying people around Black Adam, and we would have gotten a Black Adam corner of the DC universe. But you know, that's Monday morning quarterbacking at this point, and que sera sera. So anyway, yes, number 4 is Morbius. Number 3, Disney's Strange World. This movie is doing nothing. Okay, actually, no. I can actually make some intelligent commentary about Strange World. How I can do this, I don't know. And God help me, I think it might give me a brain aneurysm. But in order for me to give you the full context of Strange World, I have to explain to you something about the SJW worldview. In the SJW worldview, there is this premise. It is a very wrong premise, but it is a thing they believe. That there is no such thing as intrinsic value, and no one is ever drawn to things for the things themselves. They're only ever convinced to like things basically by way of normative or cultural consensus, i.e., there is no actual intrinsic value to anything you like, and you'll just like anything that's put in front of your eyes if it's put in front of your eyes often enough. So we, the SJWs, can take anything, not give it any likable or redeeming qualities, and convince you to like it regardless because there is no such thing as intrinsic value. That is a fundamental premise of their worldview. Fortunately, for those of us that live in a world that's bound by logic, value, and reality, this premise is not true. And therefore, we get to watch every time the SJWs try this as they get confused as all hell that they can't just take a thing you like, swap out everything there is to like about it, and not convince you to still consume it blindly. Because that's what they think they should be able to do. They think that because there is no reason you actually like things, because everything is just consensus based, they can take something, remove everything you like about it, and you'll still like it and consume it because you're a blank slate who can be convinced to do anything we say. As much as I enjoy watching them crash and burn every time they try that, because it's a stupid premise and they need to get the fuck over it, every great now and again they try it with they even try it with their own original IPs, and that's kind of what happened with Strange World. They tried to create a movie whose only redeeming qualities were interesting visuals, i.e., to some degree, I think the visuals in Strange World are slightly more visually engaging than the visuals in Avatar. Feel free to burn me at the stake later, but I've already done Way of Water. Way of Water was number 6 on the list, so you know where I stand with regards to that. Like interesting visuals for Strange World, more interesting than Avatar, Way of Water, and SJW talking points. Those are the only qualities that Strange World can even be said to have. Not redeeming qualities, not good qualities, not bad qualities. Like, they are the only definable qualities that Strange World has. Everything else is just blank. And I'm going to say this as someone who is actually gay. Making a character gay does not automatically make them interesting or even representative. If you want gay people to feel represented by gay characters, you have to actually make them interesting and engaging. Because the only impression I get when you make gay characters whose only personality trait is to be gay is you expect me to blindly consume literally anything you offer me and not have any underlying premises or standards that I hold you to. And yeah, no, fuck you. That's never ever going to happen. If you want me to feel represented by a character, maybe you should give me a character that's worth caring about and a character that I can actually feel some kind of connection to. Anyway, that's my advice to Hollywood, which they're probably not going to listen to. That you basically could title both of these lists the advice Dalton has for Hollywood that no one is going to listen to. But here we are. Anyway, um, so that's Strange World, and in the immortal words of Forrest Gump, that's all even I have to say about that. Um, Paraphrasing. So now we get into something that actually does give me a lot to talk about because I have some history with this movie, and it's yet another case of the work was already done for you. How the hell did you fuck this up? Because, ladies and gentlemen, my number 2 is Lightyear. Because, again, you the main problem okay, no. I can't even reduce this to a single main problem. There are so many problems with Lightyear. I could attack it from like 3 different angles and we would still be here all day. But starting from somewhere resembling reasonable, the reason I pointed out just now that all the work was done for them and all they had to do was insert concept A into movie B and they would have already won is when I was a kid, there was a TV show based on Buzz Lightyear, like in the universe of Buzz Lightyear. It was called Buzz Lightyear Star Command. And it went on for several seasons. And it had an extremely likable cast and an extremely interesting, albeit extremely ripped off from Star Wars, premise. Um, so, so you would think that if I were a writer in 2022, looking at okay, so how do we do a Buzz Lightyear movie? I would essentially reverse engineer what people liked about the TV show, just like most people end up having to try and do when they create TV shows based on movies. In this case, you could literally do it in the inverse, and all your work is already done for you. Like, just take Booster, Mira, XR, and Buzz, and also the LGMs, because the LGMs are also amazing. Um, and also the captain that Buzz answers to, because Space Rangers are basically cops in Buzz Lightyear Star Command. Take all those characters people like, and take basically Wayne Knight's version of Zurg as the model and reverse engineer a movie from that show, knowing full well all the canon that already exists in that show. That was all you had to do. And you had Pixar's budget and skill to do it with. But instead, they don't do that. None of the characters, none of the world building, none of the lore from Buzz Lightyear of Star Command appears anywhere in Lightyear. And instead, what they do, bearing in mind that this movie is supposed to be a movie that in universe came out in like 1995 and was supposedly like Andy's favorite movie and the basis for his love of the character in the Toy Story movies, which is another thing. You already have a lore established in the form of the TV show, and you have a apparent go-to audience because Andy from Toy Story is supposedly like your go-to audience, and they still fucked it up because instead of creating a fun, over-the-top action sci-fi animated movie like you would get in the 90s, in the vein of let's take some elements from Star Trek and some elements from Star Wars, combine them with some comedy and some over-the-top action, and boom, we have a movie. This is the kind of thing that you would base the show on. Instead, what they do is they try to make Buzz Lightyear Buzz Lightyear the Oscar bait movie, and not even just an Oscar bait movie, because if they did that with 90s sensibilities, we would basically get a movie like Contact, because that's basically what this kind of movie would have been in the 90s somewhere. Instead, what they do is they make Lightyear the Oscar bait movie, but with modern Oscar bait standards instead of even 1995 Oscar bait standards. So what we get is basically take the worst aspects of Christopher Nolan, the worst aspects of Denis Villeneuve, the worst aspects of Alfonso Cuarón, and the worst aspects of Chloe Zhao a la Eternals, and make a Buzz Lightyear movie based on that with some modern social justicizing in the background. Do you see why I beat my head against the wall whenever I think about this movie? Because the work was already done for you. You already had an entire TV show's worth of lore to reverse engineer, and you had whatever you could mine from the original Toy Story movies. Like this should have been as simple as assembling an IKEA piece of furniture. Insert premise A into stylization B and reap the benefits thereof. But no, instead, we get a Buzz Lightyear movie that is as soulless, bland, and disgustingly pretentious as 2021's Dune or 2013's Gravity or any given Christopher Nolan movie, although obviously they were taking the most inspiration from Interstellar. Like, that's the level of movie we get. And that's supposedly the movie, according to the lore of the movie we're presented with, that inspired Andy to want to go out and watch the Buzz Lightyear of Star Command TV show and buy the Buzz Lightyear toys and so forth. Press X to doubt all of the above. Yeah, but as someone who actually does like the Buzz Lightyear mythos, this was insufferable. As someone who genuinely would have liked to have seen a version of the Buzz Lightyear from Buzz Lightyear of Star Command turned into a movie, I find this annoying. And as someone who hates movies that deliberately try to be boring in the name of being intellectual and beating you over the head with themes so obvious and superficial and transparent, and yet they seem to be so self-congratulatory too. This Lightyear is just awful. It's just awful. I hate it and I want it to die, and I'm glad it did kind of die because it made no money. Like it and Strange World combined made less money, I think, than Treasure Planet, and that sort of makes me happy. But this is still the worst movies of the year list, And so, yeah, Lightyear is on the list. Um, and now we come to number one. Although I saw a comment after rewatching yesterday's live stream from I think it was Ed Brewer who wanted me to go through the like 10 through 2 before delivering number one. So for those who need the recap, uh, number 10 was Thor: Love and Thunder. Number 9 was um and see, this is why I didn't do the recap last time because I'm now forgetting what what order I put shit in. Um, but number 9 was Jurassic World Dominion. Number 8 was 3,000 Years of Longing. Number 7 was The Woman King. Number 6 was Avatar: The Way of Water. Number 5 was Pauly Shore's Pinocchio. Number 4 was Morbius. Number 3 was Strange World. And number 2 was Lightyear. And now for number 1. Something that I'm fairly certain that if you've seen my review of this movie, you know it was going to be number 1. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is The Menu. I've already done a review for The Menu, so I'm not going to go through my entire review of The Menu again. But long story short, as I said, the reoccurring theme of the worst list are themes over in-universe logic or in-universe quality, and movies that should have been an obvious win that you had to actually go out of your way to snatch from the jaws of victory and make a defeat. And thus, we find ourselves at The Menu. And instead of going through my many, many problems with The Menu first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a list of all the movies you should see instead of The Menu if you think The Menu's trailer looks interesting. Because there are many, many movies and shows that give you more of what you want from the trailer from The Menu than The Menu will ever deliberately and on purpose. The first movie I'm going to recommend to everyone who would otherwise like to see The Menu is a movie called The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, Her Lover, starring Michael Gambon and Helen Mirren, and directed by Peter Greenaway. That is a movie that uses food comedy or food horror while still giving you essentially what amounts to visual food porn. Much, much better than The Menu. Also, Hannibal, both the movie and the show, are better at satire and food porn and actualizing the concept of a sadistic gourmand as a premise. Other movies that you should watch instead of The Menu. Any of the Purge movies, any of them, are better at the B-movie turned satire premise than The Menu will ever be. The Hunt, again, same thing. Better at the B-movie turned satire premise than The Menu will ever be. The Most Dangerous Game, same thing. It's a B-movie premise, and it's satirical of human nature and the dark comedy of human nature and how we eat each other and yada yada. Like all of this is better. Julie and Julia, better at food porn. The movie The Chef, better at food porn and better at kind of being artsy fartsy about it. Or I think that movie was just called Chef. In any case, the reason why I'm going through this long list of movies and shows you should engage with instead of The Menu is you would think, based on the trailer, if you know anything about the movies that I just outlined, that was the kind of movie you were getting with The Menu. A dark horror comedy satire where a highly intellectual, almost Hannibal Lecter style chef is like pushing the boundaries of what is culinarily possible and decides to go full Most Dangerous Game about it and starts using humans as ingredients. And in it somewhere there's elements of The Purge and that sort of thing. Also, before I forget, there's another movie in this same vein, better than The Menu, that you should watch. It's called Ready or Not. It's basically the same premise, but with a deal with the devil being the inciting incident for the movie, and instead of food, the gimmick is, what if we turned hide and seek into a game of survive to the death? And it's excellent. Anyway, so you would think, based on any movie ever and the trailer for The Menu, that that was the kind of movie you were getting with The Menu. Instead, what you get is not a Hannibal Lecter style genius cannibal chef who wants to push the boundaries of culinary bullshit for either his own personal amusement, nihilism, or for the sake of seeing where he can push the culinary arts to. Instead, what we get is a chef who is so depressed and hates his job so much that he just decides that he's going to cook and eat a bunch of people he doesn't like for reasons of, I have an emotionally scarring backstory that I could have resolved my own self like 5 ways from Sunday, but I'm not going to because satire. And by the way, I guess this is as good a point as any to rebut the positives that Eglinton apparently found in this movie. He and apparently the entire rest of the critical press are going to tell you, oh, but it's so meaningful with how it satirizes certain casts of people and how it uses the chef's cooking as a metaphor for any creative endeavor. But here's the thing. Number one, this satire is so superficial and surface level that B movies from the 80s had already grasped and utilized this premise. Like, it's already been done. And yet we're supposed to sit there and pat the filmmakers of The Menu in 2020 frickin' 2 on the back because you're saying the exact same obvious superficial things that were being parodied in previous B movies. Yeah, no, thanks, but no, fuck off. Also, a large percentage of the satire is, hey guys, do you know we hate you? Hey guys, do you know we hate fun? Hey guys, do you know we hate the sincere application of the premise that we sold you on in the trailer? And I'm sorry, Eglinton, but if you don't think that Nazi Cap from Secret Empire deserves praise because it's insulting to anyone who would ever want to read it, and you don't think that turning the Red Skull into Jordan Peterson is in any way a meaningful amount of satire because it insults anyone who would want to read it and doesn't make any fucking sense, then I'm sorry, but making the audience surrogate a foodie who doesn't know how to cook, despite the fact that he knows everything about cooking and is actually capable of lecturing the chef about it, is definitely not good satire. That's basically what The Menu's satire is. It's the same satire as Nazi Cap is Trump or the Red Skull is Jordan Peterson. It's, we hate our audience, and anyone who would take this premise seriously or want it done sincerely is a childish, evil idiot. Therefore, that's what the satire
Dun,
of The Menu
dun.
is. Period. And
Hey, how you doing?
I'm in the middle of recording my top 10 list.
Oh, you're doing live stream, dude.
Yeah, and I'm doing my top 10 list.
Okay, go on ahead, and then we'll fight.
I mean, we can finally have the menu fight if you want to, because I'm on my number one. It's the
Yeah, I
menu.
know. I know. I was in the. I don't like it when people throw barbs, and plus, I wanted you to see this, okay? Because text is sometimes a little worse than words and such. I'm not angry or anything. Let me go silence the bird. Finish, please.
Okay, but yeah, I don't. No amount of, well, they're making a point about creativity, well, they're making a point about the audience of movies, is ever going to excuse the menu any more than, well, we're trying to tell Nazis to go fuck themselves, is going to ever be an excuse for Nazi Cap turned Trump supporter or Jordan Peterson Red Skull. Like that's the level of we hate you, we hate this premise, and we hate anyone who would want this premise taken seriously. The menu does, and I'm not going to allow it on any sort of pseudo intellectual film theory grounds. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on what I would consider the worst movie and the most exemplifying movie of everything that is wrong with both Hollywood in general and in particular with independent cinema, which is The Menu.
Well, I kind of figured it would be up there. I didn't know it would be your number one. You and I, one of the cool things I like about doing a movie channel with you is, one, we definitely have different styles of approach, and two, we don't always agree. It's a Siskel and Ebert kind of thing.
Yeah.
Except for the bald one is also the fat one. But
I mean, yeah,
I'm okay. I'm okay with
the bald fat one and the thin short one. We're literally at Abbott and Costello of
but
movie reviews.
You did, by the way, you did post and you mentioned a lot of vagaries when you're talking about the menu. Also, you do something Tristan does, and when examples are given, you poo-poo them, but you don't actually approach them. As far as what I was saying, once again, you mentioned something I've been fighting is, God dang it, did you tag me, you dumbass bird? I don't know if that's something, but anywho, you go about, people say, okay, why do you like it? Boom. But you didn't argue my points. You just said, well, many movies did it already. Yeah, many movies do a lot of things already. There's not a lot of new premises under the sun. This one, I think, handled its premise very well. Your main objection, and you state it first every time, isn't so much what the movie is, but what the movie isn't. And I get it. When I saw it, I thought the same thing as you. It looked like the freaking Dangerous Game with a chef. And, of course, if the chef is going to win, what's he going to do? I was expecting a same kind of crazy cannibal chef kind of thing as you were. What I got was a hell of a lot better. And I thought it was a very good character study.
Yeah, no,
yes, it is dealing with a content creator. In his case, he's a chef versus the different kind of fans. What you're talking about is the super fan. When you mentioned Nicholas Hoult, great freaking actor. Love his work in here. But he was the super fan. He knew the techniques because he watched, not because he experienced. It's kind of like I would compare him to a sports fan who looks like me, who knows all of the stats, who knows all of the plays, who could even tell you Coach A needs to bring this guy in and put him on in there. Could not play, couldn't actually coach, do any of that himself.
Which again amounts to, hey guys, do you know we hate you? Hey guys, do you know we hate anyone who would take this premise seriously and want it done sincerely?
Ahsoka is asking what's going on. Okay, me and him have been having the menu fight since it came out. So this is the first time we've brought it to the table, ladies.
He ambushed my top 10 list, and now we're finally having the menu conversation.
There you go. Yeah. Well, like I said, I don't like I don't like it when people snipe from the comments, and I felt I was sniping you from the comments. God dang it, he did. He tagged me. I've managed to avoid having this on a shirt during a live stream.
And to be fair, the reason I didn't give any specific examples to your points that you raised in the comments this time is because I already went on for 20 minutes about the plot of the movie, and I didn't want to go into let me recap the plot over again.
I think I tore a hole in my shirt pulling that shit off. But yeah, we've been talking about the menu since it came out. We often disagree about a movie, but this one we're almost coming to blows.
Yeah, this is it is very much, I guess, about how I approach movies. Mm-hmm. I have grown increasingly to hate the very concept of themes. Like I am. The more modern day movies I see, the more hardline I become to the Michelangelo approach of it's not about the sculptor. It's not about the people who see the sculpture. The sculpture is already in the marble. The artist's job is to chip away the
Oh,
unnecessary bits.
that, yeah.
And movies that exist solely for my metaphor, my themes, my
But
socio-political gobbledygook drive
this
me
is
up
good
the
and
freaking
straightforward.
wall.
This is good and straightforward, in my opinion. And once again, I had to adjust as well because you and I we saw the preview and such. We were talking about it together now, and this is it is not the preview. The preview, if anything, the preview did an injustice. I mean, obviously, it got butts in the seats, and a lot of this. You are in the minority opinion of this movie, and that's not a bad thing to be. I mean, you know, people like
I
some
mean,
stuff,
people
people
can
don't
be
like.
wrong, so
Yeah,
I will stick to my views.
there's a lot of movies that the world loves that I don't. You know, it's just the way it goes sometimes. Top Gun Maverick. I'm just kidding. No, that's great.
I mean,
Um,
it wasn't on my top 10 list. It was
yeah,
my thing with Top Gun Maverick is I can't even judge it one way or the other because I'm well aware that
of
it's not
course.
I'm not the audience for it. It's not my kind of movie. It's not something that I would watch for enjoyment. Therefore, I'm just going to kind of let it be its own thing. It's probably a very good version of what it's trying to be. It's just what it's trying to be is not something I want. Like,
But the one thing I like about the menu is that its characters are not spelled out for you. You very much the premise, as you say, you don't like the premise, the themes, excuse me, are not spelled out for you. So it is sort of a dark comedy, but when you break down and you discover the themes and you discover what this person represents, what that person represents, it just adds another layer, and that's one thing I really appreciate. I also appreciate the way that the protagonist. It's kind of weird, this kind of movie. There's no real good guy, bad
I
guy
think
kind
the
of thing.
protagonist is supposed to be Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I think it's
Um,
supposed to kind of be like a split
I like
style
the
ending.
way
I think.
I like the way she defeats him. She defeats Ray Fiennes, and I got to tell you, based on the acting alone, this doesn't deserve a bottom spot. But it's your list. I
I
said my
and
piece. We had our little tiff.
Yeah, and
I'll leave that.
I think where Englentine and myself come out differently is, as he said, we were both sold on a premise in the trailer, as I think were most people, and he found that the version we got in the movie was an improvement.
Mhm.
I found that the version we got in the movie was pseudo intellectual back padding and hey guys, don't you know we hate you? And
Okay.
I'm sorry, but it wasn't a intellectual or compelling point when they turned Cap into, Nazi but also Trump supporter. It wasn't an intellectual or substantive point um when they turned Red Skull into Jordan Peterson for the sake of dumping on everyone who likes Jordan Peterson. So I'm sorry, but hey guys, you're the audience, and the audience doesn't know a damn thing is
That's
not
not
an
what this movie
intellectual
does.
point. And
Oh,
my main issue with the menu is it's not that the movie is different from what I wanted. It's that what I wanted is better than what we got from the menu. Like if you're going to go out of your way to spite what this movie should have and could have been and what you sold the movie as, you've got to actually make sure that what you're offering is either equal to or greater than the version you were selling. And I found this movie to be a perfect example of nothing in the world matters, nothing where your actual sincere like quasi B movie you wanted from this premise. Not only are you not getting it, we're going to go out of our way to spite it for you. Like you're going to get the exact opposite of what you want, and you're going to like it because we say so.
well,
And that's never going to fly for me.
mine are coming out tomorrow, along with some reviews of a movie called Sick, a movie called what is this? Something Fortune, Operation Fortune, and a movie called Doggone. Because you got to have a good dog movie in January now. It was, hey, Liam Neeson retired, so it's dog movies. And
Yeah, I
in
mean,
my best list, I'll explain why Dalton is wrong. But you called me out by name, so okay. I was listening in because I was making the thumb, and I had to hear
okay,
what
yeah,
movies you liked, so I could put them on the thumbnail. Um, yeah, I think I did okay. But there you go. You're all set up. You have a great time. Finish your list, and I'll head out. Have a good time.
yeah.
See.
This has been a non sequitur from Eglantine on a otherwise top 10 list from me. Anyway, so yeah, that's my top 10 worst list. God, no more movies like The Menu, please. If you're going to reinvent the wheel, you have to actually make sure that what you're offering is better than the wheel. And if you can't reinvent the wheel, so okay, I guess to sum up to sum up my advice to Hollywood, re The Menu. When all the work is already done for you, i.e., when you have 10 or 20 movies to use as a template for what this movie should be, when the premise is already baked in the trailer, don't deliberately spite your audience. Don't deliberately make the opposite of what people were expecting or what people wanted or what people were sold on because you think you're so much smarter than they are. And by the way, if you're convinced that you're smarter than your audience, number one, you're probably not because that's probably an egoism thing rather than a actually it's probably Dunning-Kruger more than anything. And number two, if if your premise is I'm giving you the exact opposite of what you want, but that's okay because I'm smarter than you and I know you better than you know yourself. If that's what you're working with, you probably have to come with more than superficial quasi themes that were, like I said, already done better in every iteration previous to this that played it more straight and was more sincere about it. Because treating art like a means to an end rather than an end in itself will never ever be something I'm okay with. Your as I said in my best list, dear Hollywood, fuck your themes and fuck your authorial intent. They are utterly and completely irrelevant to the thing itself, the actual art itself. Your job as the artist is to filter the art from the realm of ideas into the realm of physical reality. And the best way of going about that is to get out of your own fucking way, which means that when a premise basically hands itself to you and you go, well, I don't want to do it the straightforward correct way because it's too easy. I have to do it the exact opposite way just to prove how smart I am or how coordinated I am. You're not. Don't. Just like again, sometimes things are done a certain way because that is the correct way they are done. It's like watching someone try to reinvent yoga by sticking their foot and their leg all the way up their ass to the point that it's coming out of their mouth. Like that is a thing that no one has ever done before. Sure, that's a thing I've never seen anyone do, but there are reasons why no one has ever attempted that. And if you're standing there on one leg with the other up your ass, going, "Hey guys, look at me! I did something that no one has ever done before," don't be surprised when everyone around you is awestruck for like 5 seconds and then goes, okay, but why on earth would you do it that way? That's the definitively wrong way to do it. Anyway, so I've rambled on enough. Anglantine interceded when I was mid rant and it fired me up more, so that might be why. So I'm going to spare you the rest of my pontifications for now. Um, Speaking of my pontifications, at some point in the next few days, I plan to do a review slash breakdown of what is probably my favorite movie ever, or what I refer to as my favorite comfort food movie, because it's a movie I can watch over and over and over again and never not enjoy myself, which is Roman Polanski and Johnny Depp's The Ninth Gate, which also might very well be Johnny Depp's best movie. I will be doing a review slash breakdown of that at some point in the not too distant future. And over on I Love Comics, I plan to do a 3-part series on Doctor Strange, Doctor Fate, and what makes them unique and distinct from each other. And yes, there's going to be a 3-part series on that. Most people don't know those characters, and I have a lot to say about them, so stay tuned for that as well. Other than that, I do have my own channel for those that don't know. It's called The Authenticator. You can find it on YouTube. I don't post there very often because I'm too busy often posting places like here. Um, I also do a weekly podcast called The Podcast of the Storm with my friend, the Brainstormer of Pop Culture, which we do every Sunday. That's something you could look for if you want more of my ramblings and pontifications and so forth. And of course, the ranting. Lord knows I wouldn't forget the ranting. Everyone loves the ranting. Um, I also do a men's rights and men's issues show with the mighty Mr. E2099 called The Duality of Man. Usually we try for every Sunday. Often things get in the way because scheduling issues come up. But our goal is to make it a weekly thing every Wednesday. But it doesn't always go that way. But if you're interested in men's rights, men's issues, or how various topics pertain to men's rights and men's issues, Duality of Man is also a thing you can get from me and my fellows that we do regularly that you probably wouldn't otherwise know. Anyway, I'm going to sign off and shut up now because I've been going too long. Cheers, guys. I will see you all in the next one.